I'm Jasper, so first year PhD from University of Oregon. So today I'm going to talk about my master's research on how map designs influences the way people see and feel about climate change. And before we go into the details, let's go over some of the parts here. So firstly, I will go over why this research matters. So especially in the context of climate communication and why map designs matters and how it plays an important role here. And secondly, I'll go over what we already know about global glacial retreat patterns and also the human influences on the glacial retreat on a global scale. And thirdly, I'll go over what we know about glacial retreat on what we did in this research, including how we conducted survey questions and how we distributed. And lastly, I'll go over what we found from this study. So when we think about climate change, glaciers are definitely some of the most powerful visual symbols that we have, which makes invisible things visible. And what we believe about climate change also has a huge influence on how we act. And maps here play an important role because it connects us to places like we never probably gonna visit. So let's say like a glacier in the North Cascades of Washington or somewhere in, maybe like Alaska. And the design of these maps do matter. So the way information is visualized can also shape how people feel about what they see and how they feel and understand the change that's happening around the world. And previous research in climate change communication also shown that emotion drives engagement. So more on next slide. So emotions here may shape how people respond to climate change. And there are two types of emotions, so maybe more. So like negative emotions, such as fear, can trigger emotions, also maybe cause people to shut down, and also depends on how we frame the message. And positive emotions like hope can encourage engagement by making people feel the change is possible and also their action matters. And here were the two questions that guided my research. And firstly, how different map designs influence people's perceptions of glacial retreats and climate change. So again, we already know visuals are powerful, but do different designs, maybe like symbols or layers, can shape how viewers interpret the environmental change differently. And second question was how emotions play a role in the way people respond to these maps. So some visuals might evoke fear or urgency, while others could inspire hope or optimism. I'm also curious to explore which emotion responses are most effective at engaging people with the realities of climate change. So if you refer to the right graph, and it was done by Zhou et al. In 2016. So here we can see a few glaciers around the world, and it's from different parts of the Earth. And the data range we got is from the 1600s to 2000s. So if you can see from the map here, so the glacier has retreated in the past century and more sharply in the recent decades. Also, regional variation will also play an effect here. So if you guys look at blue line or also the orange line, which from the New Zealand and Norway. Despite these differences, so the overall trend still clear. Glaciers around the world are shrinking, and this graph illustrates a global pattern. And let's talk about what we did in this research. So we picked South Cascade Glacier, which in North Cascades of Glacier. Just don't get fooled by the name of it. And it's heavily studied since the 1950s, and it's one of the 5 USGS benchmark glaciers. So if you guys are curious what a benchmark glacier is, so it's basically like the glacier selected for long-term monitoring, and you guys can like get past glacier data results and also like some area image for the specific glacier, and it's available on the USGS website. So in terms of the survey, we used a platform called Prolific. So it's a like Tim in the morning kind of describe like the software, how he distributed the survey questions. So it's kind of similar to that. So for the Prolific we use, so we can also tailor to, we can choose like certain people, like different like education background maybe, and also like some age level and the part of the regions they're from. And after that, they were redirected to the Qualtrics, so where we hosted the survey questions. And after that, participants will make consent to the study, and they would take like 12 minutes to finish the survey. And of course, they will get paid after they finish the survey. For our study, it was a between subjects design. What it does was that participants were divided into 3 groups. So each group willing only one of the 3 map designs rather than all of the map. And here's a visual of how they worked. And if you guys wondering what we included in the survey questions, and here are the components we have. And for the time constraints here, I will only cover the 5 parts, which were NACIS cognition scale, stimuli, Geneva emotion wheel, attractiveness, and also the awareness of glacial loss. And let's begin by NACIS cognition scale. So to help understand how individual differences in cognitive style, which might shape how people interpret the glacier retreat differently, so we use this scale. And this is a validated 18-item scale that measures how much people enjoy thinking deeply and tackling complex problems. And to your right is a screenshot of some of the questions. So you can see some question maybe asks you like, I would prefer complete to simple problems, or things is not my idea, thinking is not my ideal fun, and that kind of questions. And you guys will, the participant will get to choose from the scale 1 to 5, so where 1 to be the extremely uncharacteristic and 5 to be extremely characteristic in this case. And here were the stimuli, and finally show the maps. So what I use in this study was the 3 maps you can see in the bottom. So it's lines and the field polygons, and also the satellite image cutout extent. So in terms of the year I chose, it was from 1967, 1979, 1992, 2015, and 2023. I somewhat presented the Geneva emotion wheel earlier in last year, and also the AAG earlier this year, and also it has done a lot of works by Meyer Weiser, Calvin Fish. So what you guys do, again, it's like also like a self-report instrument that helps people understand and also categorize their emotions. And after saying like a participant view the map, if they feel the most hopeful, they will click the largest circle. If one feel like the least guilty maybe, like they will choose the smallest circle, and of course they can choose no emotion, and yeah. In terms of attractiveness, so it's only one question, basically rate the attractiveness of the map. So let's say if they don't like the map, hopefully it's not the case, so they will choose the left option, which is not attractive at all, and vice versa. If they feel like extremely attractive, they will click the last one, which is extremely attractive. And to assess how well participants understood what the maps were showing, so I asked 4 questions focused on the glacial loss and extent. These questions measure how clearly the map conveyed size change, volume loss, long-term retreats, and also temporal clarity. And participants will respond to, again, like the Likert scale question. And this section helps evaluate how well map communicate the science behind the glacier change. And next, what we found from the study. So participants' awareness of glacial loss was one of the key outcomes in the study. We found a statistically significant difference here as well. So participants who viewed the polygon glacier extent map reported the highest level of awareness about the glacial loss, and followed by the line map and also the satellite image map. And this suggests that a few polygon visuals may better communicate volume change and long-term progression. And perhaps it's because the shaded areas make the shrinking glacier more visually apparent compared to lines or satellite imageries. And the line map here reflects most glacier maps appear in the scientific literatures. So it's simple, it's clean, but simplicity comes with trade-offs. And personally, I'm not a big fan of this. It's kind of like, spaghetti. It's like laying on the map, and it can make people confused without the year labels. And in terms of the polygon map, it was the most effective overall, and it led to the highest awareness of glacial loss, and has seen the most visual among participants with a lower default cognition rating, and that means people who prefer simpler visual information. And lastly, we have the imagery map. So again, the map shows realism, but the realism didn't really translate into the clarity. And participants were visually engaged, but struggled to detect the extent of the glacial change. And here's a result from the click diagrams from the Geneva emotion wheel. So if you refer to the bottom legends, we can see the darker the color is, there are more clicks in the certain emotions. And here we found some comments between line and polygon. So if we see the bottom left, so sadness, compassion, and guilt, those were the participants who chose the areas most often. And when we look at a polygon map, so hope and anger, where participants chose quite so often here in this region. And surprisingly and unsurprisingly, the imagery map did not perform well, which you can see here. A lot of folks just pick the central part, which was the no emotion zone. So before we dive into what we did for the hotspot analysis, and here's a quick overview of the terminology here. And so we used the hotspot analysis tool in ArcGIS Pro. So because GW has like the spatial layout, so we can easily analyze where people's emotion response cluster and not just what emotions they reported. The tool used a fixed distance band, so which means each click on the wheel is analyzed in relation to its neighbors within a certain distance, and every click within the same map condition is treated as a neighbor. And if you guys are familiar with the hotspot analysis, so the default color where hotspots to be the red one and cold spots to be the blue, and gray points shows where there's no significant clustering. And again, this analysis helps us visualize where emotion and cognition is, and rather than only which emotion appear most often in the click diagrams. And here is the result. So when we refer back to the last slide, and this slide was for the emotions by awareness of glacial loss. So if you guys look at a polygon map, people who have higher map awareness or who understand the map well, you guys can see the hotspots are located in the bottom corner. And the cold spots means people who have lower awareness scales. And here is the emotions by need for cognition. And again, like the people who have higher need for cognition rating, so you guys can see the hotspots distribution. Oh, forgot to mention, so this study was previously done by Michaela Garrison and my advisor, Calvin Fish. And if you guys want a deeper reading how of the GEW thing works, you guys should check it out. And yeah. And along the project, I consulted with like the expert terrain mapper here, Alethea, and also my committee member who is a glaciologist, and Dr. John Christian. In terms of the limitations, it's important to know that these maps just represent 3 of the designs. And the line map here reflects the traditional way of how glacial retreat is mapped. And the polygon map simplified by filling each extent, which makes the volume loss more obvious, but also risks oversimplifying the data. And the imagery maps bring realism by showing what glacier actually looks like. It's, didn't really translate into the overall clarity and other visual pleasant. And the overlapping textures make it harder to interpret, and also, in general, just make people harder to understand the extent changes. So to conclude my master's study, again, polygon map was performed the best out of the 3 maps, and it shows the higher clarity and also shows the glacial retreat better. And even though imagery maps shows the reality of the glacial extents, but the clarity and also the engagement was not as good as the polygon map. And emotional responses differ, and it's varied by different kind of map conditions and also their backgrounds of, saying like age level, education level, or other things. And lastly, effective climate change communication is just about making maps more detailed or realistic, and it's about designing with audience in mind and understanding that people's cognitions, backgrounds, and also education level might shape how they interpret the environmental change. And for my future work, I really want to explore the, let's say 2.5D maps, oblique view of the glacial loss. At this point of the study, 2D maps is really challenging to depict volume of glacier. It might be easier to see like the glacial extent changes, but if we added, let's say the volume, it will make people interpret the maps more, differently. And I also want to test the audience more in a diverse group. And currently our audience was focused in the US scale. And I wonder what happens if we put it in like the world scale and if we draw out different results from this study. And along this project, I got a few small grants to finish this project, and I want to say thank you to all of this folks. And also, if you guys have any suggestions, feel free to email me and my advisor, Calvin Fish, and you guys can see the email there. And thank you guys for being here, and you guys are almost done, so yeah. All right.
Have any questions for Jasper?
What tool did you use for the Polygon Glacial retreat? And did you think about using different color gradients to display it?
Oh, so I mainly use ArcGIS Pro for this subject per se because it's only like focused on like 2D perspective. Over the lunch, I was asking like a lot of like good folks who are in this field about like how to make cooler 2.5D maps in the future. But again, like currently I only use like ArcGIS Pro to finish all this map making and also some color adjustment through like Photoshop and that kind of stuff. And future maybe I will port in like Blender, so a lot of like pros in this area can maybe help me with that project, and I'll be more appreciated. So yeah.
I was wondering if you thought about combining any of those techniques, so having like either the polygon or the aerial image with the lines and testing people on that.
You know, like as I mentioned, it's like only 3 of the designs we tested, but eventually we will do more stuff with that and maybe make more like realistic terrain shaded areas and all the shaded relief. You know, that will take into considerations for the future designs.
All right, thank you.